Chapter 5, Diagnosis. Hikage did not like this. A room full of screaming children and parents who were doing absolutely nothing to stop them. Even just sitting in the room was stifling, the parents' loud chatter joining the loudness of the children. This wasn't the first time he had been the one in control. Somehow, the ninth always managed to put him in control when it was loud. If he was older, Hikage might have punched the kid. He wasn't a pro like his counterparts, but he could handle a kid. Izuku? Miss Midoriya asked, crouching down in front of him. She had been talking to another mother for the past half hour, though Hikage did not leave her side. He looked at her, nodding slowly. She frowned, biting her lip. "Are you doing all right, baby?" she asked, taking his hand. Hikage resisted the urge to pull away from the odd physical contact. "Yes," he said simply, the words feeling wrong in the mouth that wasn't his. It seemed to only worry her more as she nodded and stood back up. He went back to watching the kids, moving behind the woman if they got too close. He hadn't dealt much with kids in his life. He had moved to the woods quite young and had only focused on getting stronger, both intellectually and physically. His successor was far better with small children than he was, a pro who specialized in child cases. Why he wasn't here instead was a mystery only Izuku could answer. "The doctor will see you now, miss," a nurse said, walking over to them with her clipboard. Miss Midoriya nodded, taking Hikage's hand as she led him forward. "Don't worry, baby. There aren't any shots or anything." He could at least be glad for that. Shots were one of the few things he did not like. Needles just gave him goosebumps. "Right in here," the nurse ushered them in, before shutting the door behind them. Hikage stayed directly next to the kid's mom, unsure of what to do in this situation. The kid would probably jump right up on the table, but he felt strange about doing that, like he was invading someone's space. Miss Midoriya took him to the chairs beside the table, sitting down as she rubbed his hand. "Would you like some strawberry ice cream after this?" she asked softly. He shook his head, crossing his ankles. He didn't want to intrude on this woman any more than they all had been for the past year and a half. How they had managed to get away with it was astonishing. Plus, he didn't like strawberries all too much. She went to say something as someone knocked on the door, stepping inside. "Hello, you must be Izuku Midoriya," a woman said, holding a hand out to Hikage. He took it without a word, shaking it. "Wow," she exclaimed, "you have quite a strong grip." She took her hand back, looking at Miss Midoriya. "I am Dr. Soichi." Miss Midoriya's hand tightened on his. "Where is Dr. Garaki?" "He got a big promotion to another hospital," Dr. Soichi explained. "But don't worry, I'm a trained doctor and have been practicing for years. Izuku and you are in good hands." Miss Midoriya nodded slightly, biting her cheek. "Now, I see we are here for a diagnosis?" Hikage perked up slightly at the word, trying to think. The last he had heard of a diagnosis was the kid's quirklessness. Hikage himself had last been diagnosed to die, so he was a bit concerned at the word. Miss Midoriya nodded, looking down at him. "Izuku hasn't been acting quite right. I worry I'm just being overprotective." She hesitated, brushing hair from his face as Hikage flinched away, just slightly. "He's just not quite himself recently." The doctor nodded as she set her hand back down, looking over her notes. "You've noticed Izuku has been displaying different symptoms over time. You mentioned that his mood fluctuates randomly and that he has a difficult time with other kids." She paused, nodding. "This could be caused by his quirk status." "What do you mean?" Miss Midoriya asked, her hand tightening on Hikage's. The doctor sighed, pushing her hair out of her face. "The quirkless individuals we've seen all seem to display a type of mental shift. It is not entirely out there to think this may be related. I can get you a pamphlet for dealing with someone with your son's state, and we can be on our way." Hikage scoffed slightly at the obvious quirk discrimination. The two women looked over at him, faces mixed. "You're being discriminatory against the quirkless group as an entirety," Hikage said before he could think better of it. "Excuse me?" the doctor asked. Hikage realized his mistake and looked down at the floor. They had their slip-ups over the year, but he hadn't thought to bite his tongue here. "Listen," Miss Midoriya said, taking the attention back off him. "I just want to do more tests. I've waited 3 months to come see you. I need help." The doctor sighed, shaking her head. "Look, your kid is a wonderful kid, and I'm sure you love him very much. but a quirkless kid is bound to face some level of bullying. Miss Midoriya's hand tightened. He had a hard childhood. He lost his father to a villain, and with you working full-time. Excuse me? Miss Midoriya asked, her voice deepening slightly. Are you brushing this off to blame it on me? Not at all, the doctor said, not looking up. But it's very possible Izuku here is just struggling at home, and with lack of maternal care. Miss Midoriya stood up, ripping Hikage to his feet as well. We're done here. My son's quirklessness is not the root of all his conditions. If you cannot give us the proper care, we will find another doctor who can. Miss, the doctor yelled, but Miss Midoriya continued walking, throwing open the door. Hikage struggled to keep up on the short legs, looking over his shoulder. The doctor's face was bright red, her hand clamped on the clipboard. He raised a hand and flipped her the finger. He missed her reaction as they stormed into the main room. The parents seemed to grab their kids out of the way as Miss Midoriya threw open the doors. That fucking bitch, she mumbled, shoving people out of the way of them. Hikage stared up at her in amazement as she fumed, her grip still gentle on his. He had never known maternal care. He hadn't known anyone to care for him like this. Izuku was a lucky kid. The time that Izuku was staying in the Vestige plane was growing longer. He didn't start the morning out anymore. Only late at night or around the blonde kid did he want to be out. They all saw the issue with it, but Daigoro couldn't bring himself to scold the kid like they wanted. The kid seemed so happy playing with his toys. It didn't change if one of them joined him on the mat. He was content to play alone. He had found safety in the same Vestige plane that had trapped the rest of them together. Izuku, his mother said, "Are you okay?" She looked down at him with a small frown, her worry lines far greater than they had been once. Daigoro nodded, squeezing her hand slightly to reassure her. She nodded, brushing the hair from his face with a sigh. This office was quieter than the last 3 they had been to, a small clinical hospital. None of them had ever had to experience the level of unknown bias when they were alive. The quirkless population was slowly going down, and it seemed to have gotten so much worse. Finally, the doctor walked out, the door shutting behind her gently. It was an old lady, her back hunched over a large hot pink cane. She looked oddly familiar, but Daigoro couldn't quite place her. Maybe from a fleeting scene they had watched of the 8th? Miss Midoriya, the woman said, smiling at her softly. Thank you for bringing young Izuku. His mother sighed, rubbing her eyes with one hand. I really don't mean to be a bother, but I need to ask right now if we're going to look at more than just his quirk status. The nurse smiled kindly, sitting down beside them. Of course, darling. While quirks do impact us as a society, I find that we can never find the answer if we do not look at the whole picture. She nodded as she spoke. Of course, Izuku's quirk status is amazing. Being quirkless means there is very little standing in the way of finding the root of our concerns, Mom. Izuku's mother sighed, nodding as she squeezed his hand. Thank you. This was really my last hope. Every other place has simply brushed us off. The woman laughed slightly, shaking her head. I wouldn't dream of it. Would you like to come back with me? Yes, please, Izuku's mom said, standing up. Oh, let me. She reached down to help the doctor, but she moved her hand away. I'm all right, dearie, the doctor said with a laugh, using her cane to help her stand up. I've been through far worse than standing up. Daigoro narrowed his eyes at the woman, trying to see why she looked oddly familiar. He wouldn't have known her. 8 was the best bet. He shook his head, giving up on trying to place her, as they were led down a small hallway to a cozy-looking room. Can I interest you two in any water or apple juice? The doctor asked, opening a small cooler. Hikage could see an assortment of drinks and snacks within. Izuku's mother nudged him, and he nodded, making a small sound. Milk? He asked, hoping like it sounded like something a kid might ask for. The doctor nodded, grabbing a milk and handing it to him. For you? She asked Izuku's mother. Water is okay, she said. Thank you, doctor. She let the word trail out, biting her lip. Suzenji, the doctor said with a smile as she handed her the water. Izuku's mother nodded, sighing. Sorry, I know it's bad manners not to know your name. I've gone through so many doctors just trying to get appointments. Thank you for reaching out to me. She waved her hand as if it was nothing, sitting down on a chair across from them. I heard about how much you were struggling from an old friend of mine. I was more than happy to help out. She gave Miss Midoriya a strange look before her gaze shifted away. Izuku's mother's hand tightened as she made a strange noise. Daigoro looked up to see her lips drawn tight and her eyebrows furrowed. The doctor didn't seem to notice or care, though, looking down at her chart. From what I've heard and what we talked about on the phone earlier, I do think I have a clearer diagnosis. Daigoro sat up further in his seat, humming. He didn't even fully know what to call the odd joining of their vestiges in the plane as, but to be able to control the ninth's body. No doctor would guess it was a Quirk transfer gone wrong, but he did want to hear their guess. I believe Izuku may have a rare mental condition known as dissociative identity disorder. You may have heard it referred to as DID in the past, Dr. Shungenzi said simply, looking up at them. Izuku's mother shook her head, biting her lip. She didn't hold eye contact with the doctor as she looked everywhere but her. I've never heard of it before. I wouldn't doubt that, the doctor said with a smile. It was a rare condition, even before the dawn of quirks. Now, with many different quirks around, the condition has evolved for each individual. Some have physical manifestations of another form from childhood. Others have developed quirks, such as shape-shifting, to better protect themselves. She nodded, sighing as she shook her head. What causes it? She asked quietly, as if she didn't want to. Trauma, in most cases, the doctor said softly. Izuku's mother let go of his hand, burying her face in her hands. Izuku has been through a lot. I have no doubt that his father's death... She paused on the word as Izuku's mother shot her head up, glaring at her. It affected him, the doctor finished. 8 had abandoned Izuku, and Izuku's mother knew. She knew he wasn't really dead, and about who he was. Nana's idea of this being an old fan was being proven more right. But an old friend? 8 must have sent the doctor to help them out. They had a link to him now. Izuku, his mother asked, taking Daigoro's hand, are you all right? Izuku nodded, biting his lip as he tried to stop his train of thought. No doubt the others were already discussing a plan. You aren't Izuku, are you? The doctor asked softly. Daigoro's head shot over to stare at her as she kept that innocent smile on her face. Shit, this was something better suited for first. But Daigoro couldn't switch out. Izuku had to initiate the switch. He slowly shook his head, hoping it was the right thing to do. They had to keep this link to 8. To their quirks. What? His mother asked softly, though she didn't let go of his hand. Dr. Shungenzi nodded, handing a paper to his mother. Here is some information on DID. Unfortunately, the information may not be 100% accurate because finding cases that aren't related to the quirks has proven difficult. Essentially, your child's subconscious created protectors. It was his mind's way of dealing with information and trauma. They aren't other personalities, but identities, each with their own likes and dislikes. She paused as Izuku's mother tightened her hand, trying to understand it all, and their own names. His mother looked down at him, and Daigoro smiled slightly, hoping to show her it was okay. She gingerly moved a strand of hair out of his face, her eyes soft and warm. How can I help him? She asked softly. Daigoro paused in front of the door, the voices inside loud enough to hear. He had made the excuse of needing to go to the bathroom, and Izuku's mother had seemed okay with it. She needed to talk to the doctor. I thought I told him to stay out of our lives. The doctor sighed so loud he could hear it through the door. He still cares for you, Inko, the doctor said. I know you are still upset with him, but he can still give you guys help, if only you allow him to. No, Miss Midoriya yelled. No, I gave him chances. Over and over again. He always claimed to come back, but he stopped showing it the moment he got more famous. I have been following his career for years. Since the sports festival at UA, I'm not upset he chose his job. He's a hero. She sighed, and he could hear chairs shifting. I'm upset that he keeps coming back. He is doing what you asked. He is giving you space, the doctor countered. But Izuku is his blood, and he still cares for you. Miss Midoriya laughed, shaking her head. I am not an idiot. I won't fall for his tricks again. Not after the last time. There was a sound almost strangely like a sob as she continued. I won't let him hurt Izuku like that again. It went quiet, and Daigoro took that as his moment to enter, slowly pushing open the door. Izuku's mother's face formed into a smile, her eyes red as she reached for him. This would be so much easier if first just let them explain this to her. You sure it's just your quirk? Kachan asked for the millionth time. Your doctor seems to think it's just a mental issue. Izuku scoffed, shouldering his best friend as they walked down the crowded street. I'm sure they've made it very clear that they are not DID. It's not a mental issue, just a condition. Plus, even if it was DID, there are different types. In fact, in speaking at my therapy sessions, Kachan pulled him out of the way of a pole that he didn't see, scoffing. If you're going to blab about stuff, at least look forward. He laughed and Izuku chuckled along with him. Thanks for the save, he said, running slightly to keep up with Kachan's long strides. Kachan huffed, clicking his tongue. I haven't seen them as much recently, he commented, looking over. They finally go away? Izuku rolled his eyes. They can't just go away, but they've been giving me more space. I think they're worried now that I'm in middle school and going to mess with them more. Kachan laughed, his deeper voice cutting through the street chatter. Why don't we mess with them anyways? What do you mean? Izuku asked, raising an eyebrow as his friend walked backwards, making people move aside. I mean, Kachan shrugged slightly. Figure out how to mess with them. They're assholes for being such a shitty quirk, but I'm sure we can figure something out that will bug them. Izuku hummed, biting his cheek. I mean, they all seem pretty dead set on keeping me safe. The last villain fight we watched, I had to wait to meet with them. They liked yelling. Why'd they choose them? Kachan asked, moving back in step with him. Choose what? Kachan shrugged, shouldering a group of elementary schoolers who didn't quite scatter fast enough. Their names, I mean, they aren't exactly original. 1 to 7 is stupid. It's not like I even met them in order. 6 is the bastard that punched me. Izuku stopped in his tracks, staring at Kachan in shock. I never told you, he whispered slightly. Kachan's eyes narrowed, and he wrapped a hand around Izuku's wrist, dragging him back into a quieter alley. Tell me what, Deku? Izuku stared at him before laughing, rubbing his eyes. Their names are stupid for a reason, he mumbled, sucking in a deep breath. They aren't their real names. Excuse me? Kachan asked, raising his eyebrows. You mean the shitheads had actual names this entire time? What's the jerks? 6? Izuku asked, still giggling. N. Kachan huffed, chuckling as well as he slapped Izuku on the back, knocking him forward slightly. It's so much dumber, he yelled, shaking his head. Did he seriously choose that name? Izuku paused, stepping away slightly as he regained his composure. I don't actually know. They never told me their names. He paused, pulling crates together to sit down cross-legged. I just kind of knew them. Kachan leaned on the wall next to him, looking down. So you don't even know why they chose their names. Izuku shook his head, biting his cheek. Well, get off your butt and let's go. Kachan pulled Izuku to his feet as he yelped in surprise. He continued to drag him out of the alleyway and back onto the crowded street without another word. Wait, where are we going? Izuku called, running to keep his feet under him. The library, Kachan said, finally letting go of his hand. They got computers. What about the groceries we need? Kachan shrugged, continuing his fast pace to the train station. Just shoot Auntie a text. Let her know we'll be a little later. Izuku nodded, pulling out his cheap flip phone. Kachan grabbed it from him, huffing. Not right now, idiot. On the train. Izuku nodded, taking his phone back and shoving it in his pocket. Why do we need computers? He finally asked. Kachan grinned back at him. To look up names and piss the losers off. Oh, okay, this one was a lot harder to record because I don't know if you could tell. The only skips or pauses that there were actually like in the in-between sections. And in writing, it's really easy to like put that because I have like certain symbols I use to separate times. But it's really difficult to actually figure out how to do that for audio. So I'll probably try a few different things in this. If it's edited and there's some things separating it, just know I did that after I recorded this. Let's see, any notes on this one? I don't know how to pronounce Recovery Girl's actual name. Like, I don't know if I recall them ever pronouncing it in the anime. They may have. And I try really hard with the name, so I'll probably look hers up and hopefully have it fixed by the next chapter. As for, let's see, Izuku and the names. So, as shown in the second chapter, he kind of just knows their names. Like, he kind of just called Nana by her name without being told. And that's due to the relation with his quirk, which I will get to in quite a few ones. And yeah, there you go. There's our confirmation. All Might is not dead. Toshinori is not dead. According to Izuku, he is, though. It's kind of like Toshinori Yagi's dead, but All Might's alive. And I will also show that and get into that more, but that's why there's not like this big thing that, oh, All Might, the number one hero, is dead, because he's not. Izuku's dad's just dead. And yeah, Inko is fully aware of that, and during that funeral, where she asked Izuku to actually go stay at the Bakugous, that is when she actually talked to Toshinori, and they figured out a deal, and I also explain why she feels so hurt by him. That's in quite a few ones. Okay, so the next chapter, I have gotten some comments about the fact that, oh, it's not realistic for this, it's not realistic for this. I'm aware. This was never meant to be realistic or, follow the law or anything. This was always meant to be crack and just kind of, I write it for the fun, and it's technically titled, what did I put? Crack Treated Seriously. So it's not really like researched or looked into. I just kind of had fun with writing it how I wrote it without figuring out logistics of the law or anything. So the next one's called You Have a Wife. Of course you do. That one, we'll see how that one goes. That's the one that people were telling me wasn't realistic. But, yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. Thank you so much for listening.